Four things just moved for the Chargers. And nah, none of this is minor. There's an offensive line price tag that could turn into an overpay situation fast. There's a center option that basically wasn't supposed to be on the table, and suddenly it is. There's a real decision at number 22 on draft night where you've got to pick a direction and live with it. And then there's a trade idea inside the division that sounds so ridiculous at first. It's going to split the Bolt fam clean down the middle. If you're rolling with the Bolts, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, because this is that stretch of the offseason where one move can quietly shape the whole year. And I'll put it to you straight, do you want stability, or do you want the front office to push the chips in? Stick with me, because by the end, I'm tying all four of these together into one big choice the Chargers are staring at. And we've got to start with the one that makes people tense up immediately. Zion Johnson has been one of the most polarizing guys on this roster, and the reason this conversation is getting heated is simple. The number that's getting tossed around changes the whole vibe. Daniel Popper has been talking at the Combine about where Zion's market might be headed, and the range he's floating goes up to $20 million a year. $20 million a year. The second you say that out loud, the fan base splits into two camps. One side is like, pay him. You don't play games with the line in front of Justin Herbert. The other side goes, wait, we're doing $20 million per year for a guy who still isn't a clear, no doubt, game-changing interior lineman? And honestly, both sides have a case, because 2025 with Zion was complicated. There were legitimate steps forward. There were stretches where he looked calmer, steadier, less all over the place. And then you take a step back and you're staring at the same uncomfortable truth. Herbert was under pressure all season, and the line overall still didn't feel like something you trust when everything gets tight in the biggest moments. Now, the Chargers can afford that kind of money. This isn't a they don't have the cash situation. The real question is whether it's smart business, and whether this front office even wants to move like that. Everything we've seen under Joe Ortiz has been about future flexibility, not overpaying, building it clean and sustainable. And that's why this Zion situation feels like the invoice showing up. The Chargers declined his fifth-year option, a number that would have been under $20 million in 2026. And now, if the market actually climbs into that $20 million per year neighborhood on a multi-year deal, you're staring right at the exact problem you were trying to avoid. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The scariest outcome is the middle ground. You don't pay Zion, then you try to replace him with a cheaper option, and you just hope it clicks, while Herbert keeps living in third and long chaos because the pocket won't hold up. After what we watched in 2025, that can't be the plan. So the debate is real, and it's uncomfortable. Do you pay for security, even if you're not totally in love with the value? Or do you trust your process and go hunting for a better deal, knowing the downside is your franchise quarterback taking way too many hits again? And that leads perfectly into the next thing. Because when a legitimate center option suddenly pops into the market, it can change the whole calculus of your offseason in a hurry. When Bradley Bozeman retired, the reaction was respectful, and then instantly nervous. Because center isn't flashy. Center doesn't sell jerseys. But center is the guy who keeps the operation from falling apart. He's setting protections, handling communication, helping your QB identify pressure, keeping the pocket from collapsing right up the gut. Lose that, and the entire offense can feel shaky, even if the skill players are fine. For a while, the name sitting on everyone's tongue was Tyler Linderbaum. And yeah, I get it, that's the dream target. But reality check, Baltimore doesn't want to let him walk, and the talk has been the Ravens are willing to reset the center market to keep him. So you're sitting there thinking, awesome, if the top option stays put, what's the plan? How do we fix the middle without getting desperate or sloppy? Then Washington makes a move that changes the board. Tyler Biadasz becomes available. And I need to pause here because the knee-jerk reaction to a release is always the same. Oh, he must have been bad. That's not what this is. Biadasz isn't coming off some disaster year. He posted a 70.7 PFF grade last season, and his pass blocking has been consistently respectable. No, he's not the best center in football headline. He's not the guy you plaster on a billboard. But he's steady. He's predictable. And after what the Chargers have been dealing with at center lately, Steady and predictable sounds like water in the desert. And yeah, I'm being dramatic, but you get the point. Biadasz isn't a magic wand. He's not going to reinvent your offensive line by himself, but he can stabilize the middle of it. And when you already have high-end tackle play, and you've got resources to address guard, having a center you can trust changes how you build everything else. It keeps you out of panic mode. It lets you build with intention instead of reaching. And you already know the Bolt fam is going to argue about this one too. Some people are going to say, if it's not a superstar, why bother? Other people are going to say, give me a real NFL center who won't get Herbert killed. And if you do land a guy like Biadasz, suddenly you go into draft night with options instead of desperation. Which brings us straight to the number 22 pressure point. Because that pick is sitting there like a fork in the road. Picking 22nd feels comfortable until you realize it's one of the hardest spots in the first round. You're not high enough to guarantee your favorite guy is there. You're not low enough to throw your hands up and say, well, it's whatever. This is where front offices earn their money, and where fan bases argue for months if it goes sideways. It gets even heavier because Zion Johnson might be gone. If that happens, the safe move is obvious. Invest in the interior offensive line early. Get a young starter, keep the cost controlled, and build the protection plan for Herbert for the next 5 years. That's the straightforward logic. That's the pick most people won't question in the moment. But the draft isn't only about doing the obvious. It's about seeing what's sitting in front of you and having the guts to choose it. Caleb Banks from Florida has put himself into this conversation in a real way. Big frame, long arms, legit power. And what makes him different is the versatility. He's talking about playing 0 through 9 along the defensive line, basically saying, put me anywhere, I'll handle it. For a defense, that's not just a fun quote. That's a trait you can build around. Now, this is where the fan base gets nervous. Because if you take a defensive tackle in round 1, you're accepting risk. You're passing on a premium interior O-line talent and trusting you can still solve center and guard later. Maybe round 2, maybe round 3, maybe through free agency. And there's no guarantee. You can miss. You can get jumped. You can watch the board dry up and suddenly you're staring at, well, now what? But the counter is real too. The defensive tackle depth behind Tier Tart is still thin, and the Chargers desperately need consistent run defense next to him. Tart has value, but as a straight-up run stopper, he can be inconsistent at times. And with Deshaun Hand and Otito Ogbonnia hitting free agency, you're looking at a genuine need for young talent inside. A player like Banks could become a foundation piece, not just a rotational body, but a guy you develop into the kind of interior presence that changes how teams run the ball against you. So the question gets sharp. Do you protect your quarterback first? Or do you build a defense that forces mistakes, creates 3rd and long, and gives your pass rush cleaner hunting situations? And speaking of the pass rush, that takes us right into the last story, the one that feels almost wrong to say out loud. There's an invisible line in the NFL. Division rivals do not like helping division rivals. That's why the idea of Max Crosby ending up with the Chargers hits people like a jolt. Excitement, disbelief, and a whole lot of no way. Let's keep it clean. This started as a trade idea proposed by Seth Walder at ESPN. Not a negotiation, not an announcement. Just a scenario being floated based on roster construction, contracts, and timing. But even being in the conversation tells you something about where the Chargers are positioned, and what kind of aggressive swing they could theoretically consider. Because Crosby isn't just a good edge, he's a problem. 10 sacks in 2025, solo tackles, forced fumbles. He's the kind of player offenses have to plan their week around. He changes protections. He changes how long a quarterback is willing to hold the ball. He can swing a game with one series. Now connect that to the Chargers' reality. Khalil Mack and Odafe Oweh are pending free agents. That's uncertainty on the edge. And when you've got a lot of cap space to work with, it naturally invites big ideas. But it's not simple, because Crosby's 2026 cap hit is heavy. Real money, real commitment. And there's the division factor. The Raiders are not eager to hand the Chargers a nightmare matchup twice a year. And on top of all that, the Raiders have publicly said they expect Crosby to be on their team in 2026. So this isn't something you plan your offseason around like it's happening. It's something you talk about because it forces the bigger question into the open. How aggressive do you want to be? And when you lay all four of these stories next to each other, you can see the offseason for what it really is. Zion Johnson's potential price tag becomes a test of discipline versus comfort. Tyler Biadasz hitting the market is an opportunity to stabilize the offense without chasing the most expensive dream scenario. The number 22 draft pick becomes an identity choice: offense first safety or a defensive swing with real upside. And the Crosby idea, whether it ever goes anywhere or not, represents ambition. So we're back to the same question from the start: stability or all in? That's the Chargers' moment right now. Tell me, what path actually turns this team into a real contender? Drop your take in the comments. And if you're rocking with the Bolts, hit like, subscribe, and let's get through this offseason together, Bolt fam.